Kason Morris. I had a great time talking with Kason. I mean, what he is doing now is really interesting. He's originally from the South Bronx, New York City, of course, in the late '80s and '90s, which is a troubled area. Um, it's gotten a lot better, but certainly, during those decades, it was very high crime and tough congressional districts. But he's been able to he realized at a young age that his parents were going to be able to pay for education, for higher education. So he made it his goal, his mission, to be able to get scholarships. So he set a path for him where he would allot his time for grades and for other activities that were going to promote this scholarship. He ended up going to NYU. He's got a master's there, and now he coaches. His perspective on and his frameworks that he's set up to help people in professional and private life, and the 3R framework. He believes we're in a current revolution right now, and his book is entitled Life Work Revolution, where things are happening now at such a speed and changing so quickly with technology and other factors that it's a revolution. It's a fantastic discussion with Kason. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How'd I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Growing up in the South Bronx is a story to itself, isn't it, Kason?
It depends on who you ask, but yeah, no, definitely was. From a generational perspective, very interesting times. One of the poorest congressional districts in the area at that time. But you still find ways to work through with your working class family, and you figure out life. But for me, it also tells you and gives you signals as to like there's more out there, and it's just up to you as a person to figure out what that means.
In this fast-paced MSP landscape, how do you stay ahead? Introducing MSPinfluencer.com, your ultimate hub for MSP news, insights, and community connection, powered by Forza Dash. More than 75,000 MSPs subscribe to our MSP Influencer Pulse weekly newsletter, staying informed and ahead of industry trends. Tune in to emerging podcasts from Joey Pinz and leading MSP voices, offering essential tips, powerful insights, and success stories. Explore our multi-authored blogs, crafted specifically for MSP leaders, delivering fresh perspectives and actionable strategies. Celebrate excellence with the industry-leading Forza Dash MSP Influencer Awards, recognizing innovation, leadership, and impact in the MSP community. Join thousands of MSP professionals who trust MSPinfluencer.com to grow their business and expand their networks. MSPinfluencer.com, where today's MSP leaders connect, collaborate, and conquer, all powered by the Forza Dash platform, helping MSP vendors work effectively with MSPs and helping MSPs grow. Especially in the 80s and 90s. I mean,
Yep.
it's probably better now, I'm sure, but I had relatives in the East Bronx and Throgsneck, and
Okay.
they would say, we only go down to South Bronx if we have to.
Yeah. No. There used to be a lot of abandoned buildings, lots, and things. It's a far cry from where it was, for sure. Lots of development now. Anything with the waterfront now in New York is prime.
It
Prime
sure
move,
is.
Bronx included. So
I remember even Harlem back then, right? It was, once Bill Clinton moved there, then the gentrification occurred, and now it's expensive, and
yeah.
things change like that. And so you went to NYU, and when NYU, you got your master's there, I believe, correct?
Yep. I did a dual degree in like org behavior, workplace learning. It really got me on this track. of what I do now, because my thing for my executive career and even as a founder, it's always been I've always been really curious as to how do people learn and perform at work? How can you help people do a little bit more? And that took me down a route of thinking about like what's the psychology of people
Hmm.
in the workplace. And when you think about teaming, when you think about performance, promotions, and it's led to 2 decades in talent and org development. And from a founder lens, when I think about what I do now, we're in such an interesting time. We're participants in history in relation
Hmm.
to how things are shifting, and a lot of the norms and agreements that people have and people expect out of work, out of life, it's all turning on its head. I think for so many years, when you ask someone hey, tell me about you, right, most people will lead with the idea that they define themselves by what they do
Hmm.
and not really who they are. They're like, oh, I'm a manager, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. And now with our younger generations and just the way that the world's working today, it's a different paradigm. There's a lack of loyalty, and rightfully so. I would argue that the loyalty, I don't think it was ever a true statement in work. I think it was a mechanism to kind of keep people committed to coming in and coming out. And when you think about the 80s and 90s, even from that point, you started hearing words like downsizing,
Hmm.
you know. Now it's like now you have quiet quitting, quiet firing, so where people are just changing organization structures overnight. And now you also have emerging technologies and AI and all these things. It's a very interesting time to be in. I think there's a lot of change, but also a lot of possibility.
Yeah, in case and you say there's a work revolution happening right now, right around that framework you just described. You feel it's a true revolution.
100%. 100%. I think the main difference now is like revolutions happen all the time.
Hmm.
Think about like when factory work started and there was the industrial revolution and we were bringing the Ford Model T out. You think about the Renaissance and the printing press. The main difference between then and now, people go through the same cycles. There's like fear, there's resistance, there's like, oh, this is the work of the devil. These things
Hmm.
aren't real. But when you think about those prior points in time, humanity, society had decades, if not centuries, to normalize what was happening, like to adjust to it.
Hmm.
And then it became a regular thing. With the speed of technology innovation now being in this intelligence era, change is happening not in 50 years, it's happening in 5.
That sure is.
And that actually, for our brains, for like our human brains and cognition, change is happening faster than we have the capacity to handle.
Hmm.
We can't learn fast enough, we can't adapt fast enough. So that's putting this new level of tension and pressure on people at a macro scale. So there's no real time to adjust to it. And that's the essence of this revolution.
Hmm.
When I think about like we're going to keep going faster, so we're going to have to either evolve or perish in essence.
Hmm. It comes down to that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The term work-life balance, do you like the
No,
term?
no, I
Yeah,
talk about it in my book.
yeah.
I was very intentional about calling my book Life Work Revolution, because I believe work life balance in the term is a setup for failure.
Hmm.
Because when you break it down, right? First of all, work life, like what I just talked about, most people define themselves by what they do. So when you even use the word work life, it's like, oh, I'm a manager, I'm an executive, etc. And I flip that the other way. I'm like, you should think about what you want your life to be, and then how does your work become a tool or
Hmm.
investor in that. And then the idea of balance, right? When you take work life and you use the word balance, that means you're trying to keep things or create equality in things, and that's a setup for failure, because there's never equality in work and life. Like they will never be at the same level at the same time. So I use different words like synergy, alignment, things like that, because the goal isn't about making things equal. It's about knowing the season you're in, and how do you set up yourself for success. So if
Hmm.
I'm in a life season, I know I'm prioritizing family, I'm prioritizing health, well-being, relationship, and I've managed my work in such a way where I have those boundaries. If I'm in a work season, like I'm founding, I'm building up something, I'm launching something, I am making it clear to my family and my other systems that this is where I'm prioritizing my time. So now I have other systems and mechanisms in place to help me do that. So it's really just ebbs and flows. And that's how we avoid burnout and we avoid these kinds of things. You got to know where to place your bets to get the most return, depending on what you want to do. And that's where most of us, I think, get stuck, is that we are used to systems that we inherit. We inherit them from our families or systems that we're born in. Like me being born in the South Bronx, in the situations I was in, it would have been very easy for me to adopt those norms and adopt those systems. Even before I knew what to call this,
Hmm.
I made that change. I was like, this is not it. And my journey has been about figuring out what is it for me and then for others too.
Yeah, you really have to. I have heard you talk about the term life work balance. And I
Mhm.
like what you said about when people ask what you do. My father is an Italian immigrant. And when I go over there to southern Italy, people are insulted when you ask them what they do for what you do for work,
Mhm.
because they don't want to be identified by their job. Their
Yep.
job just gets them, is a necessity,
Yeah.
but they want to be identified by other things.
Yep. 100%. The job is a tool.
Yeah.
And when I tell like younger generations and other people that I work with, I'm like, think about your work as your first investor
Hmm.
in your freedom and whatever it is you want to do. And if you have that kind of attitude, there's no such thing as a bad job or a bad opportunity. You just got to get good at really understanding what do you get out of that exchange and how does it build you into the next thing that matters to your life. So I fully support that logic. Like you're
Hmm.
not defined by what you do.
Yeah, and I heard you say, design a career you own, not one you're trapped in.
100%.
Very different.
Very, very different. And I emphasize work at first because I feel like that's the big mindset shift that people have to make. Because sometimes we talk about, oh, happiness, well-being, and these things matter, but what is actually the biggest trap in that, or what's the thing that you have to unlock first? Very often it's about work. Because when you think about it, right? There's research that supports that you spend about anywhere between 90 to 120,000 hours in your lifetime doing work.
Hmm.
If you translate those hours into years, that's roughly almost 30 plus years.
Hmm.
And now if you take waking hours and think about like, hey, I got to sleep. So when you math all that out, that means 2/3 of your waking hours are potentially dedicated to you working.
Wow.
So you got to really take a step back and be like, hey, how do I redefine this? How do I take some control around it? How do I design that in a more meaningful way so that 2/3 of my waking hours are not just about me exchanging my time for money, but it's about me living a life and designing a career that I don't have to escape from. I mean,
Hmm.
that's my end goal and my intention is how do you design and live a life that you do not have feel like you have to escape from? Because when you think about work, right? What do people live for? They live for weekends. 2 out of the 7 days. And then those days are usually jam packed with other obligations. So you're really not even getting
Hmm.
days of joy, and then you're back into these cycles. So imagine if you show up with the holistic attitude that every day is a greatly designed day, and I'm going to get the most out of it for my life and all the other things that matter, and then work is just a tool in that. Very, very different way of thinking.
Yeah, of reframing. And speaking of framing, you kind of created, well, you didn't kind of, you created a framework, the three R's.
Yep, that is when I think about the revolutions that everyone like has to kind of take like in super simple terms. Like that's ultimately what you have to do. And when I think about it, I mean, I have a number of like frameworks that I use and utilize. But when you think about, when I talk about the idea of revolution and in my book, right? There are three types of revolutions. There's the internal revolution, there's an external revolution, and then there's a community revolution.
Hmm.
Within each revolution, you kind of run through this process. You have to reclaim, in essence, and kind of let go of those outdated ideas and rewrite the story. And that's what we even talked about in my own story when I talk about coming from the Bronx. And then it's like you have to rewire yourself, and that comes down to the mindsets, the skill sets, the strategy, and how you approach the things that you do. And then the last R is that whole idea of rebuild. It's like, all right, how do we, now that we've rewired our skill sets, now that we've reclaimed our story, how do we rebuild this 33, 33 years of our lives? How do we turn those experiences into the things that matter to us, whether it's income, impact, like whatever it is that makes sense for you.
Hmm.
So I try to like distill it. There's so much more behind it, but at the end of the day, depending on who I work with and where we start, ultimately I'm taking people down that road and
Hmm.
through those three steps. And that's why I think about these things like their toolkits, their systems. It's not about motivation. It's like when you think about where the future of what's next is going, it's not about who knows it all. It's about how fast can you learn something, how fast can you adapt. That's what it's about. So if I'm providing you with tools that allow you to say, hey, I'm seeing the signals in my life or in my work, how do I pull out the tools and start adapting and learning whatever it is that I need to learn so that I'm in the best position? Then you're essentially, forever employable, or you're in a position of leverage.
You certainly are. I like what you say about freedom too, Kazan. 33 years of our lives are working. How do we view freedom? And you say it's not a vibe; it's a design.
Yep. 100%. Like, and I think it's an equation for everyone, right? I mean, at the end of the day, right, the way I look at it for myself,
Hmm.
and what is a big driver, is that freedom is the option to use your time however you choose. That is what it really boils down to, what you choose to do, not because you have to do it. And you start to use your skills and your experiences as currency and leverage to create systems, whether it's products, services, whatever it is that you do, to ultimately figure out your freedom equation. And then you're buying back time. And you can use money as a mechanism to do that. Because
Hmm.
there's I even talked about this in a live that I did last week. Is you have tons of people out here who can earn, and they're high income earners, but they're over leveraged because they don't have these kinds of systems in place. Over 50% of six-figure earners in the US still live paycheck to paycheck.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? That tells you that the mindset is not there, and they haven't figured out systems, and they don't really know what they're driving toward, because as you earn more, we oftentimes, the scope of our lifestyles get bigger because we don't really design them. We just go get the bigger car, the bigger house, the bigger thing, instead of using those earnings and redirecting them into products, redirecting them into assets, hiring our money like soldiers to work for us and multiply what we need to do, so then we buy back our time.
Hmm.
That's the end state of it for me. So it isn't financial advice, it isn't anything like that. It's really a logic of how do you create systems that work harder than you do, so then in turn you are being able to do the things that you want to do. And the more when you choose to do things, the more you think about it from the lens of, how am I growing and developing, how am I building rare and high value skills, And then you think about it from, how does this experience help me create leverage, whether it's a story, whether it's a product or something else, then these things will pay you back. And then you use that leverage to buy assets, build things. And that's the triangle. Most of us get caught in that first stage of, hey, I'm just going to earn money. I'm going to get really good at earning. But we don't think about, how do we leverage, or how do we buy assets, or build assets that multiply that leverage.
Hmm. When you work with people or with teams, Kazan, who will you not work with?
I try to look for people who are looking for, like, if you're looking for the quick fix,
Hmm.
the hack, the, I I need to get to this point in 30, 60, 90 days, depending on what it is. There's a bit of a calibration for me. So I think about people that are basically growth have a growth mindset. They understand, they're high performers, but they're stuck. And really, it's about permission to bet on yourself, accountability to build and think about these systems, and then people who have the integrity and the drive to do their own work.
Hmm.
That's what really really matters. I mean, and there, I think we are in a society and a culture and a world that gives you a lot of, like, fear of missing out. Or if you're churning and you're going through the systems and you're barely scraping by, it's like, oh, you deserve this vacation, or you deserve this item as a replacement for, like, all your hard work and all your pain and all your struggle. But what does that tie you to? That ties you to a quick fix emotion, not a long-term state of wellness and being. And then oftentimes that has some kind of financial bearing to it. So what did you do? You now dug yourself into a financial hole for a quick moment, because you wanted that vacation, you wanted that fancy item.
Hmm.
It has diminishing returns, and now you're back into the worry of, how am I going to pay for this, how am I going to handle this, back into the system of exchanging your time and effort, and just wearing yourself out. So I look for people.
Hmm.
I look for people who I can discern that think that way. I will point them in directions of others that may be able to help them, or I'll get really clear as to how far I can take them, and then we figure out other ways to go from there.
Kazan, what's the difference between a manager and a leader?
I would say, from my opinion, a manager is more concerned about output,
Hmm.
and a leader is more concerned about outcome.
Hmm.
And I'll elaborate. By a leader, when I think about myself as a leader, it's not about sending your soldiers into the fight. It's about being with them, being locked with them in that fight, being in a position to provide service. I believe in being a servant leader, where it isn't about me telling you what to do. It's about creating space to allow you to develop and grow and take ownership and come to decisions that lead us to an outcome. So it's not, when I think of a leader in that way, leaders don't look good because they achieve the goal. Leaders look good and feel good because they see their people develop, and
Hmm.
see their people going above and beyond. Like any good leader to me, and when I think about myself, is that I want people who are better than me in different things. And what I do is I create that space and opportunity for them to shine, for them to grow, for it to fill gaps, and then we all achieve that outcome together. Whereas when I think about a manager, and there's need for management. Sometimes you're managing, you're in a situation, a project, and you need to know how to move the pieces in the right places to get the result. So I don't want to put this tension that management as a skill is bad.
Hmm.
I think I think it's a useful skill to have. But I think what we do is we over rotate on the idea that we have to manage people like resources to get the outcome no matter what, and we do that at the sacrifice of being a leader, at the sacrifice of teaching lessons, at the sacrifice of failing fast and failing forward, because there's more power in learning the lessons from that misstep in the overall journey or the overall like outcome of the team or of the vision of what you're trying to do. And I see that most management styles can sometimes be very short sighted. Like, we have to get this right now, and then there's often a fear indexed with that, like the fear of failure, the fear of not being correct. Like, it doesn't mean you necessarily want to be wrong, but I think if you have more of a leadership mindset in management, you'll be right more than you are wrong. And even when you are wrong, the lessons that you learn from being incorrect are multipliers well down the road.
Hmm. Yeah, look what you said. With the world, we need both. That's for sure. I've
Mhm.
had managers who've come to me and are convinced that they're leaders when they're not.
Right.
That can be a very difficult conversation. Sometimes ego gets involved and you got to try to map that out a little bit, but that's very difficult discussion to have. Sometimes they feel hurt about it because some feel that management is less than a leader, but again, we both agree the world needs both. They're just different skills.
100%. And I would say too that not everyone's meant to be a manager.
Hmm.
Not everyone's meant to be a leader. And I think sometimes when we look at work and particularly in the corporate realm, sometimes the old way of thinking was like, as I ascend up the ranks or as I grow in my career, there's this correlation that I have to be a manager, I have to be a leader in
Hmm.
order to be successful. And that's because the system has put out that perception. It's like the more control I have, the bigger span that I have, then the better quote unquote leader and manager I am. But that requires skill sets. And sometimes you might have somebody who's a great specialist, individual contributor, or they have knowledge and they're really useful as a part of the puzzle. But then when you put them in that quote unquote manager or leader position, they're not equipped for it. But they feel like they have to do it because of that perception of growth and control and title. And that's one of the things that in my seat I think about very often when I ask people and I'm developing people. It's kind of like, hey, you know, you don't have to be a manager of many in order to feel like you're successful. You can manage the work. You can do different types of work. It's just all about growing in alignment to whatever your needs are, but then also growing in alignment to whoever you're working with and working for, and knowing when those things are in alignment or when it's time to break up and keep it moving. When you say, hey, you know what, this no longer serves me, and it can be amicable. And but that skill of discernment and recognizing those signals and doing the introspection, these are all very very much future forward skills. And it's something I would say, because people ask me a lot, they're like, oh well, what are the skills for the future, like what do you need? And I'm like, all the research, whether it's like Work Index, World Economic Forum, Big Five consulting firms, when you look at it year over year for the last 5 years, within the top 5 or 6 skills for the future, they're always very human centered.
Hmm.
So, and by human centered, I mean these are things that AI and emerging technology will not be able to do anytime soon. So, radical curiosity,
Hmm.
communication, adaptability and resilience,
Hmm.
critical thinking, strategic thinking. Like, these are the kinds of things that really matter, because AI will not replace you. It's the people that know how to use AI and then make very human decisions with that data. Those are the people that will replace you.
Hmm.
And that's what I will say that on the mountaintops.
Right.
Is so it's like, it's not about becoming a technical person. It's about, yes, understanding how AI works in a sense, but it's more about how do you turn this into a tool and a partnership that helps you move faster in making more human decisions? And how do you sharpen your sword on the more human things, the relationship management, the storytelling, the critical thinking, communication, curiosity, things that I've mentioned.
Yeah, things that technology cannot replace. Adaptability is one is a big one. Being able to
Yeah.
move and to adapt. Yeah, nothing can replace that. You wrote the book, Kays, on Life Work Revolution. What do you want the reader to come away with?
I mean, at the end of the day, for me, I want people to feel like they're moving from this perception of survive to thrive, and they acknowledge that we are all participants in a macro revolution, and that it's on us as individuals to have revolutions within ourselves so that we can show up.
Hmm.
And I think I like what you said, and I agree with you that if I could pick anything out of that short list of future proof sort of meta skills, it's like how they walk away feeling confident that they can build the mindsets and skill sets to be adaptive,
Hmm.
and they can say, hey, I know how to move myself from point A to point B, and then if I need to go further and I need help, I now have some tools that will help me. I now have a community, I now have a resource, I now have a thought partner that they can come to and
Hmm.
go further with it, because these things don't happen overnight. You're not necessarily going to do all three at once. It's just providing a landscape of thinking, and then my thing is start where you are and then run these plays, and if I can help you along the way, I'm happy to do that.
Hmm. What's your style of writing, Kazan? Are you pen to paper? Are you outline? Are you
I'm
mind
a
map?
I would say I'm a mix. I try to free flow. I like sometimes I get some ideas as I'm thinking, and I'll voice note. I'll voice note some concepts, because sometimes when you think something, the way you think about it will be different than the way you write it.
Hmm.
So I do a bit of like using design thinking theory. It's kind of like flare and focus. It's like, hey, I have an idea. I'll make a note to myself. I'll record some voice notes, and this is a great example of where you can use some partnering with like these AI tools. Is think of an AI tool like a Claude or a GPT as a super powered intern, and it's like they can help you organize thoughts, brainstorm. It's not the copy and paste logic of taking what the output is and using it in a literal way. But I think when I think about additional skills, again, prompt engineering, these kinds of things, this isn't about being technical.
Hmm.
It's about how you partner. So more and more, I'm a big experimenter. I'm like, hey, how can I use these different tools? Like Google Notebook LLM is another great tool. Um, it's like, how do I get my thoughts, my ideas? I capture them quickly, and I create, whether it's a digital or written space to jot down, and then I iterate from there. I mean, even when writing stuff down, you can take a picture now and put it into the model. So I feel like we can't limit ourselves. That's the beauty of having like a growth mindset and being having a continuous learning mindset along with this adaptive piece. It's like, how can I leverage a tool that will then help me move faster to a minimal viable product, whether it's
Hmm.
an article, whether it's the book. Like the book, writing the book was one of the hardest
Yeah.
things I've done, and it was a very good forcing function, because I have a lot of ideas and a lot of techniques, and I was like, well, how can I put this in a translatable story based on my own journey and based on the signals and patterns of the people that I've helped. Um, and I even want to go back to it. Like I'm like, there's another version of it.
Oh, really?
I would write this differently. Like it's and in the spirit of progress over perfection, I think it's a testament to living in my values. I don't think it's my best writing. I think it was good enough, and good enough to commit to what I said I would do, which was when I published it last year. I said, this year I'm going to write a book. It's important that this message gets out there, and that I share my voice and my story, and that I help as many people as I can.
Hey, Joey Pinz here. Want to take your podcast experience to the next level? I'm excited to invite you to become a YouTube member. It's the absolute best way to support the channel and enhance your connection. Join our amazing community and unlock the incredible perks, custom loyalty badges, exclusive emojis, and priority comment replies. Your voice will always stand out. Be the first to watch new videos with early access, receive special membership shoutouts, and get exclusive behind-the-scenes photos and updates. Dive into content available only to our members, special videos, deep dives, and insider perspectives. Engage directly with me. Suggest podcast topics you want to hear, and even get personalized video shoutouts. Hit the join button right now and become part of something special. Let's build this amazing community together. I can't wait to welcome you as a new member. Join the Joey Pinz family today. Yeah, writing a book I thought I don't think I have this right, but I remember a sports writer describing it like a drop of blood is at a time per word or something like that. It's just,
Mm.
yeah, it takes a lot out of you. And then once you think you're done, editing just goes on and on. And that progress over perfection is a real motto to keep in mind, because you could just kind of drive yourself crazy. But it's worth it though, I think, because a book is a statement in time as well.
Yep,
He
it
did a
is.
really good job with that.
I appreciate it. And actually, when I think about it, part of what I also talk about in the revolutions, and I talk about this in my content, is what you're thinking about at the end of the day is life, work, and legacy. These
Mm,
are these are themes for me. So as a father to four beautiful daughters, like I think about legacy isn't just about what you leave behind. It comes through your works and like the impacts that you create. So for my daughters to see me go through this journey, for me to produce this book, they're like, wow, like you wrote something. Like I can say my dad is an author. Like that to me, and they get to understand and see my ideas, whether they agree with them or not. It's just been a beautiful thing to embody that idea of,
mm,
of legacy, and it's something that they get to enjoy from me today, and can be a part of that like going forward. That's another way I see. And you could think of a product or an asset like that if you wish as well. It just depends on the individual. You could easily say, hey, a book is an asset that helps you monetize and can help people get into your programs. And yes, that's a lever, but my motivation was multifaceted in that regard. It's more about showing by doing and not just talking about it.
hmm. Do you consider yourself a coach, Kazan?
I think that like there's this line between mentoring and
Mm,
coaching,
mm,
right? People often kind of conflate them. I i'm someone who's very passionate about being helpful and helping people. If you get anything from me, you walk away saying, I didn't think about this that way. That's ultimately what I want from anyone that
mm.
interacts with me,
Perspective.
whether I'm in a boardroom, whether I'm talking to someone. If you walk away with that kind of understanding, that kind of pull, then I feel like I'm living in my purpose. So when I think about the idea of coaching and the idea of mentoring, these are things that are important to me. But I would say I'm not the traditional coach. Like I think about a sports coach and how you're on the baseball team and they're conditioning you and they're doing certain things to help you go play the game. In that way, yes, I align with coaching. I'm trying to help you shift your mindsets. I'm trying to help you think about your skills in a different way and build skills based on your understanding of yourself. But ultimately, at the end of the day, similar to coaching, it's like I'm not shooting a shot for you,
Mm,
but I've built you up enough and I've created enough accountability that when it's time for you to shoot that shot, you feel more confidence, you have a greater likelihood of creating that connection and executing that transformation. So yeah, so I would say I am a coach, but then I also think about like the mentor side of things, where sometimes proximity is power. Like I feel like the more I'm able to do, and the more I'm able to, I'm still designing, I'm still learning, I'm still growing. I feel an obligation to share that, and those that are willing to go along in the journey, they go along, and because they're going along in the journey, they up level themselves, because of that exposure, because of the conversation, not so much because I took them and coached them through, a process or a method.
Yeah, it's very interesting the difference between a coach and a mentor. What do you think is the difference between a coach and a therapist?
I would say, like, when I think about a therapist goal, like, and again, this is just my own
Of course.
anecdotal perspective, is they're creating space for you to hear yourself.
Hmm.
So it's like a therapist isn't necessarily going to give you answers. They're going to ask questions that allow you to self-discover and actualize your own answers based on the information that you're providing. So they're just going to help you click deeper, click deeper, until you get to some kind of outcome that allows you to, transform or achieve an output. When I think of a coach, coaching is more systematic. It's like, what are the habits, routines, rituals
Hmm.
that will help you build up something that then allows you to do something else. So it's like, hey, you know what? You're playing the game. You're playing baseball, and you're trying to improve the strength of your swing. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna do a whole bunch of push-ups.
Hmm.
Here's my method of doing push-ups over the next 6 weeks. We're like, well, what does push-ups have to do with swinging a bat? And then the coach has an explanation, a rhyme or reason to that. And then lo and behold, through that routine, all of a sudden, they start swinging the bat more over the handful of weeks, and they have an improved outcome.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I see it, when you based on the two options you provided.
When I'm fortunate, I get to speak to therapists here and coaches as well. Somebody once said, I wonder what your feedback on this will be. Therapist looks back, coach looks forward.
Mm. I think there is some truth to that, because a therapist ultimately is helping you navigate and maybe helping you try to find root cause,
Hmm.
because root cause is usually a looking back. It's like, here's my challenge now, or what I think the challenge is. And so then the question is that the real challenge? Let's understand a little bit more about the factors that led up to this point.
Hmm.
And then you're digging in, you're digging in, and you're unpacking. And then boom, you might find that. And then once you find that, you're kind of off to the races. Um, when I think about a coach, like, so using your perspective from where you are and moving forward, it's not like it's like looking at the symptom in a situation, and then it's like, okay, well, what are the things that I can do based on this knowledge right now
Hmm.
to help improve or alleviate said symptom or change the symptom? So I agree with that perspective, that a therapist is looking back to help identify root cause, and that clarity can help move you forward, whereas a coach is looking at where you are right now, and then they may offer habits, systems, tools, techniques that you can do today that will help solution for whatever that immediate problem is.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. Kaisan, has there been anything in the last month, month and a half or so that you changed your mind on?
Yeah. I think there's been a couple things out, and I'll be super super candid about this. One thing that I'm doing in my personal life, like outside of me being a coach, or outside of me being a founder and doing things, is I've been working on a project, renovating my childhood home.
Hmm.
So my grandmother passed last fall, and one of the things she was lucky enough to be able to pass transition in her house, in her bed, and one of the things that she asked me to do was she was like, hey, keep our house in the family, make sure that it's taken care of for the next generation.
Hmm.
um and for me, something like that, like, I'm very very core principled kind of thing. It's like it's something that I intended to start doing while she was here, because I wanted her to see the fruits of that labor, and I wanted her to see that, hey, the family's working together, we're coming together, and we're doing this thing. um she didn't unfortunately get to see that, but
Hmm.
as I've gone through this journey, you know I've recognized that I'm doing this on the principle of my grandmother's desire and wish. But then as I'm doing it and I'm working with family members and coordinating with others, it's presented and provided a lot of challenge, I'm asking myself, like, why?
Hmm.
Why? Like, I am putting myself out there from a time perspective, from a financial
Hmm.
perspective, and there's a driver within me that says, hey, if I model these behaviors like proximity, other people will get energy, they will want to
Hmm.
do it. And that hasn't always proven true for my
Hmm.
family. So now I'm on this road, and I'm taking on all this responsibility, and I'm going to see it through, because that's my nature, to see it through in principle. um but I think the hope and the desire that I had, that it would activate more collaboration, it would allow,
Hmm.
it would help fulfill my grandmother's desire. It's like that doesn't seem like that's gonna be a true statement. So now I've had to let go of that part of it,
Hmm.
and refocus and reprioritize on what can I do that's within my power to achieve that aim. And it's taking a lot longer. There's a lot more dependencies. It's a lot more cost prohibitive. These are all things that, in my normal scenario of doing things, I would have seen these red flags, and I would have quit.
Hmm.
But I didn't, because of the promise, the commitment. So that's like one thing for me that I'm like, I had an idea of how this should have worked, and now I'm like in this position of, how do I course correct and get as close to the outcome as I can?
Hmm.
And what is that new outcome? Where's that point where I is good enough? Not perfect. Like my grandmother's idea was her idea, but what's good enough given all the conditions that I'm now facing? So that's one thing that's really prevalent for me, because once I get off, for example, I get off this conversation with you, I'm done with the 9 to 5 work. Over the weekend, I'm driving up to New York. I'm in the house.
Wow.
I'm working on it, and I've been doing that for the last handful of months. You
Hmm.
know, so it's a very real thing. The other smaller example, but I think it isn't small. If I'm being candid, the ways I help people, I coach, I do workshops, I keynote, I've written this book. I recognize, I value my time, and so I'm always trying to figure out ways. How do I multiply this message, and how do I help people? And so, obviously, living into my own practices, I'm like, I need digital products, digital assets that will help that. I had an idea on an approach, and that approach fell flat on its face.
Hmm.
It cost me tens of thousands of dollars, and
Oh.
it just fell flat. So instead of, like, quote unquote, giving up on it, I'm like, I believe the mission is correct. I'm learning the lessons in relation to who I partnered with, how I delegated. I started auditing, like, why did this fall flat? Is it because I didn't show up in a certain way? Is it because I picked the wrong partners? Is it because I wasn't clear about my expectations? So those kinds of things. So now I'm in a position of, all right, this has happened. I have this sunken cost. What do I do? Do I persevere or do I pivot?
Hmm.
And living into growth mindset and living into failing forward, I'm like, all right, I've learned lessons on what it means to do it wrong doesn't mean I stop doing it. So now it's like, how do I make adjustments? And so now I'm in the process of looking for other partners and recalibrating, so then I can approach this the right way. So these have been like really hard, expensive
Mm.
lessons in founder work, in life outside of work, and I've always approached things from a very like forward thinking place of
Yeah,
like, hey,
pragmatic.
pragmatic place. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you still get burned, and even though
Mm.
it's not necessarily about me, it's like, I'm struggling through these things.
You know, I find, and this is purely anecdotal, case, and I wonder what you'll anticipate. I'm anxious for your feedback. I find my friends, colleagues, people I talk to get stuck in three ways, one or more of three ways. One first being trying to control things they can't control. Right. There's just certain things you can't control, and just the frustration that they feel when trying to control those things. Secondly, is kind of, and it's similar to control, it's holding off on happiness. I'll be happy when
Mm.
I lose the weight, or if this
Yep.
person treats me this way, kind of holding, excuse me, holding off on happiness when something happens that's out of your control. And lastly, is living in the past. I'm this way now because this happened to me then, and there's nothing I can do with it. I wonder what you think of those three.
No, I think it's very astute. I think when I think about the mountains, like when you work with others and even doing some introspection and thinking about self, I think these are three very important unlocks.
Mm,
We often define ourselves by our past, or we hesitate to step into what's next because of that. And we also can use our past experiences as a crutch. I won't do this because this person burned me,
mm.
or I won't go there because I saw something happen to someone else. So I'm actually, I don't have anything else to add to that formula. I think if most people could live in the moment, live in the present, and not delay their happiness, you find those small wins. You practice that gratitude in the immediate sense. Um, I think all the things you mentioned are things that will just help you appreciate the now. And I work on it every day. I would say some days are better than others, and it's not. One of the things I say is that like gratitude isn't an attitude, it's a choice.
Hmm.
And so when you think about happiness, when you think about like looking at the past, these are choices you have to make. You have to choose not to do that. And I would say that part of it, which I think is an underserved piece to help get to what you just mentioned, was we have to get good at unlearning patterns.
Mm.
Sometimes we're often predisposed to say, I need this new thing, I have to learn this new thing, I have to understand this thing. But it's like, what do I have to leave behind? What do I have to drop? What do I have to let go of, so that I'm creating more space to be happy in the now, to not hold on to the past, etc.
Because then I started my business back in the 90s. I'm from New Haven, so just north of you. My
Yep.
parents met in Queens there in Flushing, and then had me and moved me away. And I was working way too hard, 14, 16-hour days. You're no stranger to this. And I'm not eating well, and I'm putting my personal health in the back seat. And so next thing I know, I'm in front of the doctor. She tells me I'm at 340 pounds. So I had gained all this terrible weight, barely even recognized it. I was in my 20s. Your body's an amazing thing. It's just adapted. But she says to me, now you're a father of four daughters. I have two daughters. My oldest was just born. She says to me, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. So it scared the life out of me. So I'm driving home, punching the steering wheel. I'm upset. So I spent the next 6, 7 months, lost about 120 pounds,
Mm.
and kept it off. So you can't look at these things like a finishing line, right? These are lifelong changes you have to make. And when I tell people this story, they always say, what's your secret? What did you do? And there's no secret, Kazan. Discipline, right? I believe it's a spectrum: motivation, routine, willpower, etc. How does discipline play a role in your life, Kason Morris?
Yeah. Man, I think it's such a powerful question. And when you think about discipline, and I alluded to this earlier, it's like habits and routines. Like
Mm,
motivation isn't enough. Motivation isn't gonna always keep you up every day. I think it's important when you have discipline and you have a strong why. These are the things that I think lock you in. So even to your health point, right? You know, it's an amazing story about what that change was for you. You know, I also care about my health and well being, and I try to care about my routines. Um, I often have like I for the longest time I had a structured routine of going to a CrossFit gym
mm,
before I started any of my meetings. So it's like powerlifting, CrossFit, kind of metabolic stuff, and I would commune with a bunch of other entrepreneurial dads in all different kinds of work. They're in real estate, fitness, tattooing, etc. And this became the space where I was like, hey, I'm feeding myself socially, I'm feeding myself physically, and it energized me throughout my day. And so I was like, I protected that time and I built these routines, and the discipline of that had so many other benefits. You know, I noticed I had more focus in my work.
hmm,
Um, you know, I had more energy for my kids, and I recognized the power of habit and habit stacking. I think is how you create discipline. Like, because discipline doesn't always have to be quote unquote restrictive. I think this is something that we have to like demystify, you know, like certain things. Like you think of discipline, you're like, oh, bad, you know, not nice, hard. Yes, it can be hard, but that's just a part of it. But you can have discipline toward anything. It's really just about what are the routines and the systems that you do day in, day out that help you achieve a result. It could be as simple as like, hey, you know what? after a certain amount After a certain time in the day, I stop eating. The discipline of saying like, hey, you know what, I might have a good eating day, I might have a bad eating day, but I always stop eating by 7 o'clock
mm,
because I understand that the discipline of that habit, it helps with my digestive process. It I noticed how I wake up differently when I eat later.
mm,
You know, I notice all these other kind of lagging indicators when I shift out of these routines. So when I think about the power of discipline, it truly is about how are we building habits and routines and structure that allows us to show up every day to do the thing over and over and over for a benefit. So I'm a huge proponent of that, and if you can see it as a tool,
hmm,
I think it's a critical unlock. Whether it's financial, because hey, some of us don't have financial discipline. You know, we might get money and spend it,
hmm,
but then if you have the financial discipline to quote unquote what I like to call pay your future self, you know, that could be through saving, that could be through, you know, putting a percentage of money away no matter how much you earn into accounts that you don't see. These are things that in your future allow you more options, you know, and so having that kind of like that's another example of like, yes, you may physically as a person will try to will yourself to have discipline, saying I'm going to do this every day no matter what, but that's not always good enough. We're human.
hmm,
So the more you put systems against whatever your discipline goal or structure is, the more likely you are to achieve those outcomes. You don't even
mm.
have to think about it.
Just creating that framework, Kazan. Just like you mentioned before, you have these set up and rethinking discipline. I love what you said there. You know, I ask so many people that question, and it's a different answer every time. And there's never a wrong answer, obviously. I
Mm.
wonder, growing up in the South Bronx, how was discipline instilled in the family, in the neighborhood? What was the viewpoint there, the perspective?
It's a good question. I would say that my sense of discipline, it became driven by uh, a desire to achieve outcomes. So what I
Mm,
what I what I mean by this is that growing up, I was in a scenario where I had a ton of autonomy.
Hmm.
And I had a ton of autonomy because I was the good kid.
Mm.
So when you think about discipline, it's like sometimes people pour in energy trying to course correct, like, hey, the one that's the loudest or the one that does this. It's like, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And I didn't get formal structure in that way. You know, in a way, I would do things, or I created structure for myself because I knew I wanted to better my situation. So I was like, hey, you know what? I know I want to go to school and I want to go to college. That was something that mattered to me. I knew I wasn't in a financial situation where my parents could afford that. So what did I translate that into? I was like, well, in order to go to college, I'm gonna have to get good grades and get a scholarship in order to
Mm.
do that. Okay, how do I get a scholarship? Well, I need to structure my time, do all these different things. So I started
Hmm.
creating systems and structures that had a bigger why, so that way it limited my distractions in relation to like the other things that were around me. And I didn't have someone pushing me saying you need to do this, you need to do that. It's just because I was lucky enough to have the discernment to figure out, like, this is my mission, this is my vision. Now what has to be true in order for me to get to that? And then as a result, I think I built in discipline in my own routines. I would wake up at certain times. I would go to practice. I would go to study hall. I would do these kinds of things because I knew why. And that's how it shaped up for me, because there wasn't an explicit example in my life. But what I will say is that I picked up certain like ideas from all the inputs around me, and that's something that I do now as a designer. Because when you think about the system that works for you, is rarely a net new thing. It's often about
Hmm.
pulling pieces of things that work. And I teach this in my coaching. I think about this as a leader because I lead a lot of innovation work. It's rarely like, oh, this is just started from ground zero. It's like you borrow from a discipline. Everything I've talked about, with you today, when I think about life, work design, and all these kinds of constructs, where did I pick up this language? It's because I worked and I managed product teams, and we used to use a lot of design thinking and systems thinking. And then because of that exposure, I'm like, hey, what if you take this model and apply it to life?
Hmm.
What do you if you take this model and apply it to work? So going back to your core question around like growing up, there were certain habits and behaviors that I saw in people, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea.
Hmm.
Let me see if I can apply that to my system that I'm building to achieve my goal. This worked. Great, I'll keep it. This didn't work. All right, let me take it out. So before I even knew what to call it, it's always been about like thinking about my circumstances kind of like Legos. And then how are my experiences in my life pieces that I can add or take away that kind of helps me toward my path.
Hmm. Hmm. That's wonderful. What motivates you, Kazan?
I would say right now, um, my big motivation is honestly my family.
Hmm.
It's the idea of, and by my family, I think about like my immediate family, my daughters, my wife. It's really, being a dad is the greatest job I'll ever have that I'll
Hmm.
never be able to retire from,
Hmm.
and I'm intent on making them great humans, the best humans I can within my power. I think as a dad, I am a prototype for how they interact with the opposite gender, and I want to make sure that they have healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, that they learn lessons without having to go through all the trials that I went through. They're all
Hmm.
their own people, and the world is different, yes. But I think about the space that I create. For me, this is about living by example. A lot of the things that I fought for, a lot of the things that I built discipline around, was because of my circumstances, and it made me strong. in this case, I have daughters, and it's like, okay, I'm trying to build systems that will make them strong in their own unique ways, but they may not necessarily have to go through the same hardships. And then beyond that, when I think about being a global citizen, and I think about the world that we're in today, it's like, how can I help empower people to take agency in who they are?
Hmm.
And if you can just help one person, 10 people, you know, any way I can be of service, and this is me truly leaning into that idea of servant leadership.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, that's my why. So now I do what I do in corporate realms. I'm looking at technologies. I'm looking at innovation. I'm looking at future of work. It isn't because of me. It's really because I want to change systems. I want to make systems that are receptive to people so that they move from survive to thrive. And then as a founder, as I build products, programs, as I do thought leadership, I want to create that lighthouse that helps people, provides warmth, provides direction, and helps them navigate in the fog of what life is to today. So it's
Hmm.
not about the perfect answer, it's not about the right answer, but it's about a way forward. And that's what underpins it all for me right now.
So given the motivation of legacy, service, impact, that's what I kind of collected from what you said. How do you measure success from those motivations?
It's a very, very powerful question. The measure of success, I think there's an internal measure and an external measure, and I'll elaborate. I think from an internal perspective, I'm still on the journey with everyone from my own view. So I think as I learn to achieve happiness, as I learn uh, to the three sort of buckets that you outlined, as I learn to work on those things, not hold on to the past, as I learn to step into this vision, um, I feel like I feel like my energy around it will continue to evolve. Um, and then I think from an external perspective, it really is through my children and how they show up in the world, and then it's also through the people that I help. So success to me is when I get that direct message like, hey, I tried this thing and it worked, or hey, you know what, I got this job and I was able to increase my salary by 20, 30K, and it's not about them increasing the salary, it's about what it translates into.
Mm.
So it's like, hey, you know what, now I can send my kid to this school. Now I can spend a little bit more time, on my life. So it's like the more that people can shift from work life to life work, and the more I'm able to live into it and embody it in what I do, because I'm on that journey too. And the more that the people I help do that, that's the measure of success for me. And then that holds on to that mission. It's like, are you designing a life that you don't need to escape from?
Hmm.
I haven't answered that for myself yet. I'm designing it. I haven't quite achieved it yet, but I'm working on that goal. And the more I can get people working on their own version of that, the happier I think I am, and the more successful I am. And
Hmm.
that's what success means to me.
Want to show your love for discipline, inspiration, and the Joey Pinz podcast? Now's your chance. Introducing the brand new Joey Pinz merch store, where style meets discipline. Choose from premium apparel, cozy hoodies, stylish hats, durable bags, and your new favorite coffee mug, all featuring the iconic Joey Pinz logo. Perfect for podcast fans, discipline enthusiasts, or as unique gifts for friends and family. Every purchase supports the Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations podcast, helping us continue to inspire greatness and promote positive change. Visit joeypins.com/store today and wear your discipline proudly. Joey Pinz merch. Wear it, share it, and live it. It's almost selfish in a way to give, right? Because it makes me feel so great when I help somebody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I know that I have a colleague, friend, that that succeeded, it did something well, and I even if I played the smallest particular role in it, it's just so rewarding, and that can be contagious at time. Kazan, I love what you're doing. I love your attitude. I love your message. I thank you so much for your time today. Tell anybody who's listening, how can they get in touch with you?
Thanks. Well, I appreciate being here. I appreciate the opportunity to share. I think the best way to get in touch with me is I have a website, which is my brand website, which is kasonmorris.com. It's still evolving, it's growing. It talks about some of my philosophies, it shares some information that I have. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. There are more caissons in the world than you think.
Really?
Yeah, there are a couple. There are a few out there, but I'm not too hard to find. I provide I post regularly. I do a live series on there weekly now called Life Work Live, where I talk about topics related to life, work, and legacy. So just a lot of
Good.
I give away a lot of the stuff that can help people have the healthy conversation. I also have a newsletter that I started. I'm a couple months behind. It's called the Life Work Dispatch, and what I do is again double click on some of the ideas, some of the models from my book, some of the things that I do in my coaching, some of the experiences that I have with my family as we really try to live into life work design, and I share all the lessons and all the models, and I give these things away because it's all about helping people. So these are the three core ways to find me. From there, you're able to schedule a call, do whatever you need to do from that point.
Kason, Kason Morris with two R's, Moris.com. Everything is there. Like you said, LinkedIn. Kazan, I thank you so much. Next time I'm in the city, perhaps we'll get together and have a cup of tea.
Yeah, I would enjoy that. I bounce around a little bit because I'm in New York. My family house is in New York, but I'm also in just outside of Philly too.
Ah, very
So
good.
yeah,
You be well. Thanks so much.
same to you. Take care now.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.